The Paradox of Choice. That is today's topic on new title, Topical Talkology. And this is the first one of the 2018 with Theo and Andy.
Morning.
Good morning. So you okay?
Yeah, just fighting the flu a little bit, but apart from that, doing very well.
Yeah, I had the lurgy over Christmas. But anyway, that's just a little obstacle that we actually have to overcome in this day and age.
Exactly.
So today we're talking about Paradox of Choice. So this was one of the areas you wanted to actually
one
cover.
of the reasons that we're talking about it is because, of course, this is the season of sales, and it really is in most cases a complete con, because if you have a look at the prices,
God, that's a good way to start the new year. Very cynical, eh?
it is. If you have a look at the prices, there's either very little difference in the real prices, or there's no difference at all. Unless, of course, the shops are trying to shift their ends of season stuff, in which case you're not going to get anything that fits. So what we do is we head off to the sales, or we go online looking for good deals, and there's an endless selection of things in front of our faces. And we think that we have to get them. We can't resist getting a good deal. Now, are we ever happy? No. Do we ever have enough stuff? No. So again, this is all to do with illusionary needs, but something else, which is the paradox of choice. You and I started talking today about TV channels.
We did actually before we started this.
And I remember when there were 3 TV channels, and I could go to school in the morning, and someone would say to me, "Did you see Starsky and Hutch?" And I would say, "Yes, I did." And we could talk about it and even bond over it. But now there's hundreds of channels, and are we any more satisfied? No. In fact, are we less satisfied? Probably.
It's not even hundreds of channels, actually. Let me jump in there, because I remember the 3 channels we had: BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you could usually go in the playground and someone will have watched something because there will be one main program. Because take BBC Two out of the picture, because that was really for the oldies when we were kids. And but you look at today's age. I mean, you've got Netflix, you've got Amazon Prime, you've got Disney Life, you've got all these other things. In fact, it's becoming harder when you talk about to actually to monitor what's a popular TV show or not. They go, oh, ratings have dropped. But the thing is, how does ratings count anymore? Nobody actually watches it live when it comes out anymore. They will watch 3 seasons in one go, and then they will download a torrent, or they will do something. So it's very actually hard to monitor what people are watching at what time. Unless you're really impatient and you want to see it as soon as it comes out. So the whole face is changing, but there is so much choice. I mean, we talk about America having about 50 to 100 TV channels 30 years ago, and we couldn't understand it.
Well, in fact, we thought I can hardly wait for this to come over here.
And really, were you happier?
Of course not. And of course, what it is, it's just the jungle of instant gratification again. You just get lost in it, and in fact, getting lost makes you more unhappy.
Well, actually, I remember when I did go to the States many years ago. My brain was melting actually because of the amount of choice. Because we used to have if you're listening from the States, we used to have milkmen come to our door, and they used to deliver milk, and it was gold top, silver top, and bronze top, wasn't it? And you had the choice. As soon as you went to the States, because they didn't have milkmen, or at least I'm not aware of it, you went to the supermarkets and you had milk with calcium this, you had milk with vitamin this, and you had about 30, actually wasn't 30, but you had so many different choices. Then you went to get a loaf of bread, and you could get granular bread, you could get wholemeal bread, you can get whole grain bread, you can get this bread, you can get that, and it was incredible. And the thing is, the more confused you became, I think the more unhappy you became, because it does resist. Because what happens is it reduces cortisol, doesn't it? It will reduce cortisol. Confusion will reduce will
produce cortisol because you feel out of control. Yeah. Now again, what the way that the American company started is they started trying to produce the best, most authentic recipe for whatever it was, whether it was bread or whether it was pasta sauce. And then someone called Howard Moscovich came on the scene, and what he did is he figured out that you couldn't get the perfect recipe because people had different tastes. So what he then started doing is he tried to figure out what each section of the population actually liked. For instance, he invented the need for chunky spaghetti sauce. It wasn't anything to do with the best recipe. He just found out that a third of the population liked chunky spaghetti sauce. And as soon as he told that to the people employing him, they swept the market and they made an absolute fortune. But the difficulty is we're now given all of these different choices, and there's a psychologist called Bill Schwartz who gives a lecture on the paradox of choice. And what he says is, he used an example when he went to buy a pair of jeans. And he walked into the shop and he said, "I'd like a pair of jeans." And the guy said, "Well, what kind of jeans would you like?" And he said, "Well, jeans that fit." And he said, "Yes, but we have straight leg, we have flare, we got distressed cut, we got whatever jeans you want." So he thought, okay, let's have a look at it. He spent 2 hours trying on all the jeans that he could think of. And he did leave with the best fitting pair of jeans he'd ever bought. But he was also the least satisfied, because he had a nagging doubt in his mind that perhaps there was just one more pair he could have tried to get an even better fit.
And that level of doubt causes self-doubt, doesn't it?
It causes self-doubt. And what he said was, in the past when you didn't have so much choice, if you got it wrong, then it was due to lack of choice. Whereas now, if you get it wrong, it's your responsibility. So therefore, you're internalizing the fault rather than being able to externalize it.
Isn't that interesting? It's interesting because I was coming home on the tube with my daughter yesterday. I was at this event. It just so happens that my daughter was working, and I had to sit far away from her, not to ruin her street cred. But we did come home together last night, and it's one thing we were talking about. She goes, "Oh yeah, I'm going to," she was telling me her plans for the future and things like that, and she says, "I will never have a problem making money," she said to me. And I said, "Really?" And I said, that's really optimistic. And she goes, "Yeah, because the thing is, all you need to find out is what the marketplace is demanding and deliver it." And I said, "So how do you do that?" He goes, "Find out what's trending." And I'm thinking, if life was just so easy, because the thing is, you find out what's trending, and there could be 101 things trending. And you only have to tap into a very small area of one very small niche in a small market, and you've actually got a business. And I've got to say, I was actually quite impressed, and in some ways proud, that my daughter would actually come up with something like that. And it's not even about, and the thing is, because if there's only about, and this is where competition works.
The idealism of inexperience, one has to say, though. So let's see what happens. Just going on with the choice. It's not as simple as that in terms of externalizing and internalizing, because there's another psychologist called Dan Gilbert, and he talked about the science of happiness. And what he said was that, okay, let me give you a choice. You can either win the lottery, or you can have both your legs cut off. What would you choose? And he said, well, I don't think you need to think too much, obviously winning the lottery. But would you be surprised if I told you that 1 year after winning the lottery, 1 year after having both your legs cut off, if you measure the level of happiness, they're the same?
That's right. I do know that. I do know that study.
And he talked about an American politician who was in line for presidency, and there was some accounting scandal or something or other, expense scandal, and he lost everything. 5 years later, he says, you know what? I'm happy in every possible measurable way. And there was another guy who spent 37 years in prison for something he didn't do. And when he was released, was he bitter? No. Was he happy? Most definitely. He said, the best thing that could have happened to me. So what he says is that we synthesize happiness, whatever situation we're in, as long as that's the situation we know we have to deal with, we make ourselves happy. And then he talked about a study whereby people were asked to rate paintings in terms of how they preferred them from 1 to 10. And once they rated them from 1 to 10, with 1 being their best one and 10 being the worst one, they said, okay, out of 3 and 4, which one do you take home? And they said 3. So I said, okay, take 3 home. And then 2 weeks later they said, okay, rate them again. And the one they rated 3, they now rated 1. So they'd taken it home and they'd persuaded themselves that it actually was pretty good. And he thought, okay, now they know that there was another option, so let's do something else. In other words, did they consciously decide they prefer it, or unconsciously. So they then went to a clinic where there were people suffering from Korsakoff syndrome, which is a disease of the brain, usually alcohol-related, whereby they lose their short-term memory. And they went to these Korsakoff's patients and they said, rate the paintings. And they did. And they said, and they all took number 3 home. 2 weeks later, they went back. They couldn't remember. In fact, they didn't have to go 2 weeks later. They went a day later because they couldn't remember meeting them. And they said, okay, rate it again. And they rated their number 3 better. So this is a subconscious. Yeah. It is not a voluntary thing that we do. We subconsciously make ourselves like our choice.
That's because people choose with emotion, and they justify with logic. So when you go on when you talk about when we go to these sales and things like this, you're buying with emotion. You're thinking, oh, this is an irresistible offer, and emotionally you're thinking you got a good deal, which is why you feel better about yourself. And when you actually take it home and you actually realise in the hard light of day, I said, well, actually, do you know, I bought this, but it's not really what I wanted. I bought it because the offer was good.
No, but you see, that's the other thing we're talking about. That's the too much choice. This experiment was not talking about choice. It was saying, now you haven't got choice anymore. The brain synthesizes certain habits. It makes itself like it, and it's at a subconscious level. And they even tested it further. And they went to university, and they said, okay, you're just about to graduate. Take 50 photographs of everything around you that you're going to remember. So the students did it. And then they said, okay, pick the best 2 photographs. And they picked the best 2 photographs. And they said, okay, choose one to take away. And they split that group into 2. And the first group, they said, choose one to take away, but you know what? If you change your mind, you can always come back, because it's we've got a couple of weeks before the study finishes, and if I'll help you, I'll ring you and check whether that's what you want to do. And the other group, they said, we're sending it to head office right now, so if you choose, this is the only thing you can do.
Right. Okay.
Which of the 2 groups ended up happier with their picture?
The ones that could return it.
The ones that could not return it because they didn't have any further choice.
Right, okay.
So therefore, as humans, we are programmed to get to like the situation that we're in. But if we're given more options, we become more unhappy. We are not programmed, hardwired to live in a society with infinite choice. It makes us more unhappy because we then are under the illusion that there's something better. And one of the things that I always say in terms of the secret of life, one of the important components is learning to be happy with the good enough that doesn't have deal breakers, rather than being the slave of constantly seeking the ultimate.
Well, that's interesting, because you talk about a slave of being the ultimate, but which really goes back into your psyche about the whole dictatorship thing, that you think that's what the dictatorship works, because the thing is, it limits people's choice. Correct. And therefore people are controlled by what,
people don't want to think,
by how they live.
They don't want to think.
Yeah, of course they do. And you know what, and I accept that, and I know that, but the thing is, people still, even though they don't actually have a choice, they want the choice, but they probably don't need the choice. Does that make sense?
Correct.
All right. So they want. No,
they're told they deserve the choice. Big difference. Yeah. Because if you for instance, I remember you telling me the story. It's a very believable story of the fisherman. Do you remember? And the and he's sitting smoking a cigarette under the tree. And do you want me to tell the story? Please do.
So it's a story I heard myself, actually. So there was so you had this MBA graduate from Wall Street, I think it probably was. He goes on holiday to the Caribbean or somewhere, or he goes to a third world country, and he sees a fisherman sitting under the palm tree in the mid-afternoon sun and watching the sea. And he goes to him and goes, "What do you do?" And he says, "I'm a fisherman." And he says, "I go out early in the morning and I go and I go and catch my fish and I feed my family, and then once I've done that, I'm able to spend the rest of the day looking out into the sea and enjoying life." And the MBA graduate then turns to him and says, "Well, do you know what? If you actually started," he says, "if you actually what you could do is actually go fishing in the morning, but you could also then